Howdy, friends, and welcome to The Story Field. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At The Story Field, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started.
Okay. Hey, Storyfield. Man, today we are super honored and excited to have Bob Hasson on. Hey, Bob, thanks for making time for this. We are so blessed to have you here.
Josh, I'm honored. I'm so glad to be with you.
Awesome. Okay. So, Bob, I want to start with a question, and then we'll get into your bio a little bit, and you can segue this into your story. But how does a person go about growing a painting company that started from nothing to one of the top 1% in the nation for its industry and in its lane? How does that happen?
Well, it took 45 years, Josh.
Okay, it's not overnight. Well,
first of all,
okay,
in 1978, I started in a Volkswagen Bug with surf racks to put a ladder on, and I put one step in front of the other, day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade, and for me, it was a long process and a journey, and I know that we look, in the media, and we see all these quote overnight sensations. We look at, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and the most recent guys, and you say, wow, look, they did it. But for me and for most people that I know, it's a long journey. So I think just put your seatbelt on, strap yourself in, and get ready to, have a process.
Okay. Well, let me give you a little bit on the bio, and then let's start it. So Bob, you're the founder of Hasson Inc., which is a commercial institutional painting contractor we were just talking about. And you handle new constructions for really, large projects like stadiums and arenas, hotels, hospitals, and airports. So that's not your house jobs. I mean, these are big deals. You're also the author of several books, and I'm going to do these hopefully in order. One is you're co-author with Danny Silk of The Business of Honor.
Yep.
You also wrote a book with Shawn Bolz called Wired to Hear. And then your newest book called Shortcuts. All great books. I haven't read Business of Honor yet, but it's been on my list forever. So I love that you're on. You've been married for 34 years to your wife, Lauren, and have 4 kids and 4 grandkids. So you're in a really cool stage right now.
Yeah.
So you have a consulting business, and you serve on board members as a board member for nonprofits, ministries, and churches and schools. And really a thing that's pretty neat, and where I heard of you as well, was you're also a co-host with Shawn Bolz on a podcast called Exploring the Marketplace, which is in the top 100 of all Christian podcasts. So you're a busy man.
It's you think when you get older that, hey, we're going to think about retirement, but when God has when you're serving the Lord, you realize that things don't change like that. And it is interesting that the older I've gotten, the busier I've gotten.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that should discourage us or encourage us, but I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, let's start with your story. Tell us about, if you can kind of build out a little bit of a timeline for us, Bob, like childhood, where you grew up, move into church. Did you grow up, in church at all? And then let's bring it to current. So can you take us back a little bit?
Yeah. I am the oldest. I have one brother who's 16 months younger than me. And we grew up we're Jewish by heritage, but grew up in an agnostic family. So I didn't, even know I was Jewish until I started getting teased in middle school, the anti-Semitism in, California. The Lord found me when I was a freshman in college at San Diego State. right at the end of the Jesus movement in 1977, and got saved at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa with Chuck Smith, and then sort of just made all my mistakes as a believer. And so I'm really, really big on grace. The Lord's grace is unmerited favor. He's walked me through, all these mistakes and problems that I've got myself into, and been so gracious. I started a business, like I said, in 1978, and have just put one foot in front of the other. I've been married for 34 years, and to like the best person on the planet, and it's our marriage just keeps getting better and better and better, and so I'm just one of those guys that is in a long process. I've lived in the same place a long time. I've worked in the same place for a long time. I've been married for a long time, and not very many. I've had the same phone number for a long time. Not very many things change.
I love that. Well, so you were a freshman in college when God found you in 77, and then you started your business in 78.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, still in college when you got this thing going? Tell us about the beginnings of that.
Well, I'd had knee surgery, and I was recovering, and at the house I was at was getting painted. And so I was going stir crazy. So I asked, like, can I help? And so I helped a little bit. And then I worked for this guy for maybe 3 months and thought, oh, this is easy. I can do this on my own. And I continue to apologize for the first people that I painted their houses the first year. But because I had the ability to talk to people, I was able to, just sort of start in business. Like the first year, my gross sales were $6,000. The second year, they were $13,000. The third year, I really hit the big time. It was $32,000.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just this small growth, over time.
And it was out of your Volkswagen surf rack. You put the ladders on top.
Yeah, I might have upgraded to a 64 Ford Econoline van somewhere around the third year.
Oh my goodness. So starting from, I mean, it was you, when did you loop some more people in? When did you start kind of building a team? And, give us a little bit of the timeline. How did it go from you and a few people or whatever to like, when did some things start happening?
About the second year, I was very impressed. Jesus said that he sent his disciples out 2 by 2 because it was not good for people to be alone. And so right around the second year, I got a guy to work for me. And then I sort of adopted that principle when we got a little bit busier. Then instead of hiring one more guy, I hired 2 more guys, and just kind of started sending people out in twos. And I think, the first 10 years was a lot of struggle, and, building a business and trying to let your character shine and do the right thing. It's interesting, Josh. I had these, what I call rocket science principles. Like, how did the business grow? Well, I showed up on time. Number one. Number two, I charged what I said I was going to charge. And then the third one was I cleaned up. And I mean, for whatever reason, those 3 simple little principles allowed the business to grow. Because if you've ever had anybody over to your house to work on your house, you realize that sort of those 3 things never happen. People don't show up on time. They don't charge you what they said they were going to, and they definitely don't clean up.
So was that your version of kind of like your core values at the time, like your key, your big deals that you were telling your team and the guys with you at that point? Huh.
Yeah. I remember if we painted your living room, I'd look in the closet and find the vacuum. And then after we put the furniture back, I'd vacuum. And they'd sit in the car going like, come on, like, you don't have to vacuum. But when you got home or your wife got home, the only thing that was different was that the walls were a different color. And so even today on these massive projects that we do, our core values are the same. We're going to clean up. We're going to keep the job site clean. We're going to be safe. And we're going to be there on time. We're going to help these general contractors get accelerate their schedule if they need it. And it's a character thing that's part of being a service company that I think is really important.
Oh, I know. I'm making notes. That's a big deal. I mean, even when you're talking about cleaning up and vacuuming, that's a big deal. I mean, I imagine especially in that industry as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a random question. How many gallons of eggshell paint have you seen in your lifetime of owning this company?
Well, I can tell you this. A normal swimming pool is about 10,000 gallons of water. And on average, we put up 5 swimming pools of paint every year.
Oh, wow.
So it's just to put it in perspective.
That is
oh my goodness. Yeah, that is.
And on average, if I was going to paint the outside of an average house, it would be about 50 gallons of paint. So you can kind of look at 50,000 gallons of material a year, and an average house is about 50 gallons of paint. You can kind of get an idea of the scope.
So a couple million gallons is what you're saying.
Yeah. Over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
That's a lot of paint.
That's funny, isn't it?
Oh, wow. So your first 10 years, you already had this kind of built in the core values of, showing up on time, charge what I said I would, and clean up. And then were you in residential at the time?
Yeah.
And then you kind of chugged along and you had some guys. Did you start building trucks and fleets and people? Like, when did this start? When did you start seeing it scale a little bit?
Well, it's interesting. The first, yes, it was residential, but then I started doing insurance repair, fire damage. So you go into somebody's house who had a kitchen fire and scrub down the walls with TSP and with like a rag, and you'd end up with black streaks all the way down into your socks. And then you'd spray, you'd put a stain killer over it, and then paint. And generally, kitchen fires don't happen in nice areas of town, so it was kind of a rough go. And then, somewhere around 5 years, I started getting trucks. But I realized once I started building these fleets, I thought, wow, nobody takes care of their trucks. The amount of maintenance that was required was inordinate. So I ended up giving the trucks to my foreman, saying, you can have these. All you have to do is take care of them, and voila, they changed the oil, the tires were rotated, everything that, I was having to do, they were taking care of because of pride of ownership. And so, in those years, I did that. And then as the jobs got bigger and bigger, for example, we might be on a job for 7 years. And so what ends up happening is everybody drives to that job, their own vehicles. So we were able to not have to build a big fleet and have the expense there. That was one of the ways that I tried to keep expenses down.
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've already seen you do things different. Well, that'll lead me to this question. With 2 things, and let's talk about both of them, but in whatever order that comes to mind for you. I do want to hear about some of your big breakthroughs that God has done for you, because you said at the beginning, you said He's done that constantly for you. And then, how does hearing from God work in business?
That is an interesting question. So I see people, believers who are compartmentalized. They're one way at church, one way in their family, one way in business. And so my goal always was to be the same person wherever you see me. And so I learned this, I learned about serving God and hearing God, and, applied it to my life and tried not to be compartmentalized. So I've heard people say, well, God's my CEO, but I more look at it as a partnership. And so if he says that, the word says that he owns all the cattle on the hills, which the implication is if he owns the cattle on 10,000 hills, then he owns all the hills also, right? So if that's the case, then me hearing God in my business is just an extension of my faith. And I have tried to always employ hearing God. And when you do that, when you hear God in normal circumstances, then it gives you the ability to hear God in the extreme circumstances. And let me tell you a story. About 10 years ago, we were doing this giant hospital up in Northern California. And we got to the end of the job, and there's this multi-million-dollar dispute. And so I flew up to, with my team, up to this meeting with construction managers, lawyers, and we were going to go into this conference room to try to resolve this dispute. And what happened is the construction manager was so angry, and he was angry at the contractor, and he was angry at us. And have you ever seen when somebody gets mad that the vein in the middle of their forehead sticks out? That's how, and his face was red. And he started screaming at us, telling the general contractor they didn't know how to build. And this is a Fortune 50 company, and telling us that we didn't know what we were doing because of this dispute. And I kind of had this fight or flight reflex. And because I come from a shame background, and my dad had this spirit of rage on him. When I get yelled at, I was like, I was either going to cry, or I was either going to come across the table and take this guy down. But the Lord spoke to me in the middle of this and said, you can do something else. And so what I did is I stood up and I said, Joe, listen, I came here in goodwill in order to work this out. And I flew my team up here, and I'm not going to participate in a disrespectful conversation. So what my team and I are going to do is we're going to leave this conference room for 15 minutes. And you and your team can decide whether or not you want to continue this negotiation. And, I walked out and I was shaky. My adrenaline had spiked. My team were like, F those guys, let's get on a plane. We're out of here. Who do they think they are?
Yeah.
And but we stayed outside for 15 minutes, and we walked back in. This guy he said, listen, Bob, I am really sorry. I've been under a lot of stress. This job has been over budget and over time. I don't normally conduct business this way. And then within 15 minutes, we had a settlement that was more than, me and our team had hoped for. And when we walked out of it, I just thought, the only reason that happened is because I'd practiced for decades, trying to listen to God in the good times, so that when that kind of extreme thing happened, I was able somehow to tap into, what his voice was.
And it changed everything.
Yeah.
It just changed everything at the moment. Well, so how does a person hear and understand that for the practical things? I love that, Bob, because you're talking my language and our language, as far as I need to hear from you for tomorrow, for this afternoon's meeting,
mm-hmm.
or for our obstacle we're facing, or negotiation, or, and you've done that. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, for the practical things in business.
One of the things that I do is I pre-pray for the other side. And, sometimes it's like in Psalms, Lord, hide me under your wings and break the teeth of my enemy. sometimes it's that. And, when it's really tense, but, other times it's like, Lord, look, I really am looking for an amicable solution to this dispute. I'm asking you to go before me to the other side so that they can hear, really what my heart is and what our part in the dispute is. And I'm looking for a favorable settlement, and, go before us and speak to the people that we're about to meet with. And, it gives me a lot of peace when I go into situations like that, because, I figure, like, he's the creator of the heaven and the earth, and he came for these practical situations. He was a very practical when he was on the earth. And so I need him to help me for these practical situations that I'm in the middle of.
Do you have like a rhythm, Bob, of like where in your time with him, maybe just throughout the day, where you're just practicing? How do you practice listening to him? How do you teach us a little bit on that?
All right.
And I know there's 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, but I just want to know, for your rhythm, do you have one that's kind of developed where you get that time where you can hear him for your business and for your family and for yourself and all that? But
so I have never been able to have quiet time in the morning. I've just never been able to do it because the construction business starts in the morning. And so what I made this deal with the Lord that what I was going to do is I was going to be every minute of every day, try to be bent towards his voice. And so what that means to me is, as I'm walking through situations and meetings and the busyness of the calendar, I'm trying to remain bent towards him. And what I mean by that is, if I'm bent towards his voice, then the plan is that during the day I'm listening and hearing him in all things. Like I know what the still small voice sounds like. I know what the giant trumpet sounds like. I'm not one of those people that hears the big James Earl Jones, voice of God coming down. But I've walked with him long enough to hear the still small voice and to understand kind of the intricacies of him moving me, to and fro. Sometimes, do I make mistakes? Yeah, all the time. But that's how I've tried to manage a schedule. I find that, like, for me, in the morning when I tried to do quiet time, I was just in a million different directions. And maybe it's because I'm not disciplined enough, but I'm a pretty disciplined guy.
No, I love that you said that. Like, I can almost feel like a sigh of relief, saying like, oh, good, this is okay. I can still just walk with him and listen to him all day.
You can.
And that counts.
And you find that he speaks into everything, whether it's a billboard or somebody who walks into your life and speaks something to you, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was the Lord, and they don't even know it. Or you're reading something, he uses all these different ways to speak to you. Shawn and I wrote this book, Wired to Hear, and one of the ways that the chapter that I love the most on that one is on instinct and intuition. And generally Christians are like, you can't, instinct and intuition, that's not from the Lord.
Oh, it's dangerous. Like,
yeah, you're really? Okay, let me use the word discernment. Does that make you feel better, Mr. Christian? Yeah.
Talk on that. Talk on the instinct and intuition. I love that chapter too. That and the wisdom chapter I was really drawn to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think another way to say it is like gut reaction. If you trust that you're inhabited by the Lord, if you trust that he's speaking into your life and all of your situations, then it's not that far of a leap to trust that he's speaking to your intuition, your instinct, to your gut. Instinct is kind of like a gut. In your gut, you just know what the right thing to do is, or what the next step is. And intuition is more hearing the Lord and having this intuition or discernment. You can use the word discernment in there too, to understand what a situation is. And I think they're both really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you guys have given us the ability to think of that as a way the Lord is communicating with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful, because then it's not just me making a gut decision. It may actually be him speaking into that as well.
Well, I mean, Josh, I know you're a smart guy, but you're not that smart.
No,
and
I don't claim to be.
and when you make these massive decisions, right, that come out, if you reverse engineer it, you come back to like, oh my gosh, when I was asking the Lord about this, he directed my path towards this, and it was him who helped me make this incredible, massive decision that changed the trajectory of whatever the situation was. And it for me, it just makes me feel better that I'm in partnership with the Lord, and he's speaking to me, so that I have the ability to hear him and then make these decisions that are just too hard to make on your own.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I have a friend who's always talking, always having conversations with the Lord, and she talks about, like, she gets the gut intonation, like she gets the gut, and then later on at night or whenever she's doing her prayer or whatever it is, that's when she gets the head talking, like the confirmation that the gut was real.
Yeah,
it's just fascinating.
It is fascinating, and it's the coolest thing, and it gives you confidence that you're not in this alone.
Unstuck Coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck, or frozen, or slowed, or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
Okay, well, let's go back to the business. So we're 10 years in, 10 to 15. Were you starting to do commercial stuff at the same time? And I mean, was that even on your radar as something you wanted to do, like stadiums? I mean, you may be that visionary. I don't know. To me, I think for me, it would have been, I wouldn't have thought that big, because I just, I don't know if I do sometime.
Well, when I was young, I would paint people's houses, and then I'd say, hey, do you have anything else to paint? Do you, and I remember this man said, do you do commercial work? And I was thinking, I don't even know what commercial work is. And I said, of course I do commercial work. Of course I do.
Who doesn't do that?
Yeah. I mean, and he had an underground parking garage that he needed to have painted. And so I went and painted that thing at night when there was nobody in there. And that was my first commercial job. And it was incredible. And so, we just kept building. And so I did one commercial job. So of course I was a commercial painting contractor. Right. And we did, it was so funny because I do like Suite 30 at 1050 B Street in downtown San Diego. And you'd look at the Thomas Brothers maps, you'd drive down there, you'd park, you'd go up to Suite, the 30th floor, into the suite, and paint the building, paint this little office. And, decades later, I'd be driving down the freeway saying, oh, we painted that office building in that hospital and that, this and that.
Yeah.
Where, decades earlier, there was no way to see what you did because it was, just one little thing down there.
So it just, as a natural thing, and doors that started opening for you, it just got to be more and more and more and more.
And then into new construction. But what I found was, I talked to lots and lots of business owners who are trying to scale their businesses. And, when I see, they say, look, I'm doing, X amount of sales, and next year I'm going to do 10X, and which is a normal way to think. But, for most people, if they 10X their gross sales in 1 year, they would be underwater because they wouldn't have the staff to support it. They wouldn't have the infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really believe in slow measured growth. Look at 10% rather than 10x. Look at 15% rather than 15x, and take these measured steps in order to build.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that reminds me a little bit of shortcuts. And we'll get into the books in a minute. I don't want to skip over this, but what are some, kind of do's and don'ts? And you mentioned a few. Most important things you have learned as far as owning and operating and growing a business. Here's some keys, and then here's some don't do these things. Does anything jump off on either side of the track on that?
Yeah, the first thing is do learn how to manage your cash flow. And for every business it's different. Like for me, we have big jobs and big billings, and in order to manage cash flow, we've had to build a giant balance sheet in order to fund the cash flow and the jobs until the payments come in. There's other businesses who are able to get deposits before they start work, or it's COD, or they're selling B2B, and the payment terms are better. But it's not so much profitability that will get a business from point A to point B. It's cash flow. So people tend to get laser focused on profitability, which is very, very important. But when you're building a business, it's cash flow that's going to get you to point A to point B. And most businesses that fail, they fail because they can't manage the cash flow. And there's simple spreadsheets that you can build, but having your eye on cash flow is, in my opinion, the most important thing for a business to look at. Obviously, in today's environment, their human resources is a big issue. Things are changing quickly with respect to employee manuals, what you can and can't do. Coming through the pandemic, the stay-at-home work. I've been reading lots of articles in the Wall Street Journal about quiet quitting, about the Great Resignation, and we're in a situation with employees right now that I've never seen. And I think whatever the headwinds are right now, if you believe we're going to have inflation or a recession, I think there's going to be some correction in the employee environment also. Yeah.
So cash flow, human resources. Give us some tips on that. What would you recommend to somebody? Maybe it's more of how to treat your employees, how to keep them around. Does anything come out of just like, man, I've done this and I've seen it really successful?
I built my culture. Business of Honor is about building a culture. And so I built a culture here where I wanted to work and I wanted to be part of the fellows. When you grow up on teams or in an environment where, in the military or anything like that, you get used to a culture where everybody has your back. And so I wanted to build a culture like that, a culture built on love rather than fear. 1 John 4:18 says, love and fear can't coexist because fear has to do with punishment. And if you know a lot about businesses, there's a lot of businesses who use fear as the motivator, and people are stealing ideas, people are climbing over other people's backs to get a promotion. And I never wanted to be part of that. I always wanted to be part of a culture where there was collaboration, where there was continuity. And we have operations meetings here every Tuesday. And part of my requirement is that everybody that shows up to these meetings, whether they're entry level or up in the C-suite, are bringing their ideas. Where no idea is stupid, even though maybe we've never done what the idea is. Where everyone has the ability to show up powerfully at the table. And my goal is that when we're trying to make decisions, that we end up coming to a consensus. Obviously, if you can't come to a consensus, whoever the CEO is or is in charge of whatever team or group, they're going to have to make the decision. My goal is always to try to come to a consensus where the team is like, okay, yeah, this is the direction we're going to take. So building a culture where where ideas are encouraged, and where, nobody around the table is going to say, hey, that's a stupid idea. Those are things that aren't allowed here in our culture, and a lot of different cultures that I know of.
Yeah, I like that about building a consensus. I know you read a bunch of books and they'll tell you, don't try to do that. That's dumb trying to do it. But I think I like the fact that you do that, because it makes you work harder actually to come to a resolution and create good ideas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pretty cool.
My favorite book of all time is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And he talks in that book about level 5 leaders. And what he says is, level 5 leaders look out to the group when a good decision's made, and they look in the mirror when they have troubles. And so, I really think that, good leaders build consensus and build teamwork.
Yeah, that's neat. Okay, what about some things? Do not do these things over my, over your X number of year experience, and you do consulting. We'll get into this too.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things just that come off as don't do these things? Is there any hard lines? Hard things that come up?
Right off the bat, I'm thinking about, don't match a competitor's price. If you know what your price is, what you can do the work for, what your hourly rate is, what it is, don't match a competitor's price. It's, I've done that years, over the years, and it's never come out good. And I think, knowing your business inside and out, so that if you're in a competitive bid process, whether it's for clients or jobs, holding firm to what you can do the job for. Obviously, if there's a few points that you might want to give back in order to get some new business, that's a business decision. But recognize that you're making a business decision, and you might lose money on that piece of business in order to get more business. But I found that, the competitors will do different things at different times, and you just can't match those. I think what a lot of business owners do is they put their head in the sand when it comes to their finances. They say things like, I don't know how to read financial statements, and so I'm not even going to look at them. I'm just going to operate and see what happens. And I think that's really hard. It's hard in personal finances too. You see it in families where people won't put a budget together and can't figure out why they continue to get in debt. And I believe in being laser focused and looking into these situations and analyzing, like, well, why are we going into debt? Or why is the business not being profitable? Or what is the status of the business? And it's easy to say things like, well, I just don't know finances and I can't read a financial statement. Well, learn. And one of the things that I'm hoping at my age, I'm 63, and I'm hoping that I can continue to learn. I want to continue to have an attitude that I'm going to learn things and until the day I die. So if you don't understand how to read financial statements, find a friend who's an accountant, or find a friend who does know how to read financial statements and learn, because it'll only enhance the ability within your business to be more successful.
Oh, that's good. Have you been able to, I want to talk about your consulting business and when you came into this, because you have a heart of a teacher, I can already tell, and a coach and a friend. Has that been fun for you? Tell us kind of what you do, who you work with, and how people can even contact you on that.
Well, the consulting has been something that has been just a natural outflow. And I don't know, Josh, about 10 or 15 years ago, my schedule was crazy. And I felt the Lord say to me, he highlighted the scripture. Jesus said, I do what I see the Father doing. And so I'm like, well, how's that going to work for me with this kind of schedule? I do what I see the Father doing. And I felt like the Lord said, listen, if I'm going to tell you who to meet with, I'm going to tell you where to go. All you have to do is ask me. And so as the consulting started, at first it was, every crazy person in the church who just wanted someone who wasn't crazy to talk to. And it drove me nuts. I'm not a counselor. I'm not someone who could meet with somebody week after week after week and talk about the same problems. Drives me nuts. But as I started to call out of that kind of situation, I actually created this form that's 7 questions. And I believe that if you answer these 7 questions, you should not need to talk to me.
Oh man, I'd like to get that form.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you would, because at the end of the day, people don't want to look inward to try to solve problems themselves. They want someone else to tell them what to do. I don't want to tell people what to do. I want them to find the answers themselves. So these questions, fully 50% of the people who get sent my way, I send them this form. I never hear from them because they look at this and they're like, do you know how long this is going to take me to fill this out? Yeah, I do. It's going to take you 2 hours. And if it takes you 2 hours, that's 2 hours less of my time. And then when I do talk to you for 45 minutes, you're going to understand the nature of the problem. And I would say 5% of the people who I send that form to actually take the time to fill it out. And when that happens, I'm really excited because it shows me that they're really invested in the problem or the issue that they want resolved.
And those are people fun to work with too.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so I don't really have a consulting business. My email is bob@Hasson Consulting, but it's just kind of what I do. I'm not looking to build a business. I don't need another job.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's really neat. How about becoming an author? Let's talk about the books and how that came on board. And I mean, I love that.
Yeah. I'm shaking my head because before Business of Honor, I'd never really written a long email. I mean, I'd written strategic business plans. That's different. But, do you have friends, Josh, that see something in you that you don't see in you? Well, I did. Danny saw something in me that I didn't see in me. And he challenged me to at first he said, hey, I want to write a book on business based on culture of honor called Business of Honor. And can you tell a few stories for me? And I was like, yeah, okay. And then he said, well, let's shake hands. And I'm like, what's the matter with Danny? Like, why is he? So I said, all right. So I shook his hand and he goes, now let me tell you how it's going to be. You're writing the book. It's going to be about your life and your stories. We're going to put some culture of honor stuff in it, and it has to be done by Christmas. And I was like, dude, you retraded me. That wasn't the deal. I'm out. And he's like, oh, what are you afraid?
Because you actually get tricked into writing a book.
Yeah.
You were voluntold.
Yes.
I was. He knows me too well. He saw something in me. And so, yeah, I struggled through it. And, in that book, I tell a lot about my story, a lot about shame and my upbringing. And it was hard. I had to go to counseling, while I was writing the book. And I knew the Lord was in it because the counselor was asking me the same thing. The editor was asking me. And it was, but it was really, really, an amazing effort to have that done. I can't believe it happened. And then, Shawn saw something in me and asked me to write Wired to Hear. And I'm sort of like, what is going on here? But it took me, years to realize that I might have something to say that people would want to hear. Because, when you know something, you just think everybody knows it. And so Shortcuts, basically my last book is everything I've ever said to anyone. It's about work ethic, grit, determination, passion, resilience, and written to sort of the younger generation who might not have ever been taught this stuff. And my goal was that I wasn't going to sound like an angry old white boomer, who thinks he knows everything, more as someone who's made a lot of mistakes and is writing about, what I've learned.
No, you had a real father's heart on that. I mean, and I've read that one. It was good. And I love the time frame you built out as far as this is a slow block by block. You can't just get instant access. I mean, put your work in. Like, that's a great message. And that was super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, when I was young, I remember being young and stupid. I remember wanting things instantly. I remember, older people looking at me saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And I just bristled at that because I think, well, yeah, being stupid is being stupid. But in Shortcuts, essentially the title, I'll tell you guys, the title was supposed to be No Shortcuts, but the publicist was like, nobody's going to buy that book. So it has a white cover. It has a red shortcuts and then a black line through it. So
where were you? Oh, that's good. Have you enjoyed writing those? I mean, has that been, now you're on the backside of 3 books? That's a huge accomplishment. I mean, congratulations. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed the process, or is it still just really a tough mountain to climb and good on the top?
Yeah, obviously I've never birthed a baby, but it feels like, this whole long experience, and then you get it out and you hope, like my hope is that people read it and they're like, oh, wow, this has been really helpful. I'm hoping people can get set free. And the hardest thing about it has been that once you spend a year and a half, writing something like this, then you have to publicize it, which is hard. And because nobody knows how to do it. Now you have to go on social media. I'd never been on social media, and there's publicists, and you'll get interviewed by people who don't care about you and probably didn't read the book. They're just doing it because that's what they do. So in Shortcuts, it's been great because I've gotten into conversations with people rather than being interrogated. I'm talking about different topics, and that's what I really like to do.
Yeah, that's fun. So Shortcuts, Wired to Hear, and Business of Honor, you can get them all on Amazon and book places. And okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about, as we kind of land the plane a little bit, but I'm so grateful for this time. Is there a couple of breakthroughs that the Lord has done for you in your life or business, or, that really stand out that you would feel comfortable to share?
Yeah. So in 2007, now I'd been in business almost 30 years in 2007. And 2007, we landed these giant contracts for these resorts in Las Vegas. And what happened in 2008. The whole world turned upside down because of the housing crisis. People lost jobs, people lost their houses, and it was really, really tough. And through those years, we set 2008, 9, 10, 11, we set sales and profit records through. And so how do you explain that? Because guys were going bankrupt, businesses were going bankrupt. The question always was, wow, how's business? And my answer was amazing. And people would say, what do you mean? And so I would say, this is what's happened. And then well, how did you do that? And honest to God, it's like, well, it's the Lord. How could it be anything else than the Lord? It was such a testimony because, through that time, through all the loss and the pain that people were having, here I'm hiring and setting sales records. And it was such a testimony to the Lord because, again, I'm not that smart. I didn't I didn't do anything except was lucky enough to win these jobs. And in Las Vegas, there were 9 major construction jobs going. We had 2 of them. 7 of them shut down. 7 of them stopped.
And yours were still.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And so it was such a testimony to the faithfulness of God in my life. And then just recently, when the pandemic started, everybody remembers that. And for whatever reason, our business is deemed essential. And through the pandemic, we were hiring and having, a banner year. We were working on a major football stadium in Los Angeles. We were working on a couple hospitals, and these hospitals were scrambling to get, open. And so we were deemed to be essential. And so it wasn't until later, 30 years in 2008, and then, 40 years in 2019 in my career, did we have these massive breakthroughs. Of course, they're all through the business cycle. I've had, breakthroughs that weren't as dramatic as that, but God is a God of breakthroughs. And I recognize, and I'd love to encourage people that if you're struggling right now, and, whatever it is in your business, in your marriage, in your finances, breakthroughs on the other side. And, we sometimes, you think you're on the 2-yard line, having to go 98 yards when you're really on the 2-yard line with 2 yards to go. And, having the grit, having the determination, having the resilience to push through into your breakthrough. So what does that mean? Do you do that on your own power? No, you get into the intimacy with the Lord. You come to the Lord and plead with him and ask him to direct your paths, and he will. That's his job.
Yeah, you've answered, I think, one of the last questions I had for you too. If you had to say, what's my life kind of message, and then give me some encouragement for somebody. And I'm taking the breakthrough as the encouragement.
Yeah.
Do you kind of have a message with that? As
I have a scripture. It's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not into your understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he'll direct your paths. To the point where sometimes I take that scripture, trust the Lord in all your heart, and I put the situation in it. Lean into him with your cash flow. And I make it a prayer. I make Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 a prayer, a specific prayer to what my situation is. Because for me, if I'm not trusting the Lord, then I'm spinning out. And, I can, every time I've gone through periods of sin or having problems, I recognize it's because I haven't been trusting the Lord for whatever the situation is. And that's how I manage my life, is through Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. The other encouragement is spend time with people. Find a small group of people who you can be in covenant relationship with, who know you. So when these times happen of struggle, you have people who know you. When you try to isolate, people are calling you saying, "Hey, dude, where'd you go? Why are you why haven't I seen you? What is going on?" Isolation is the number one killer. Stephen Mansfield wrote this book called The 10 Signs of a Leadership Crash. And it's this little book. And one of the major signs is isolation. And so when I see people isolating, I'm always like, I'm going to go get that person, whatever that means. So the two things for me would be covenant relationship with people that I care about, and Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
Oh, that's so good. So I should ask before we wrap this up, and I'm so grateful. What's it like being tell me about your podcast. I mean, it's in the top 100 of all podcasts, so we need to talk about that for a minute before we wrap this up. Tell us where what the name of your podcast again, where we can find it. How is it with you and Shawn?
Tell us what all of that is like.
Show us how to do that.
It's called Exploring the Marketplace. And essentially what we do, we just, after we wrote Wired to Hear, we were so interested in people's stories that we interview normal people who are operating businesses who you would never hear from because they don't have a platform. Some of them aren't on social media. Some of them don't even know what podcasts are. But we're listening to their stories, and we're hearing the reality of what faith and hearing God is like in the business world. And whether they're doctors, lawyers, yes, even lawyers can hear God.
Yeah, amen.
or business people. Some bigger nonprofits. We're interviewing those people, and it's just incredible to hear these stories of how people appropriate their faith in a really real way.
Yeah. And so exploring the marketplace.
Yeah.
Found everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've listened to a bunch of those things, and I have loved it. Thank y'all for doing that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, there's a guy who I think he worked for Goldman Sachs, and he felt like the Lord told him to start his own wealth management business. And he's in the Midwest, and he doesn't know any rich people. So he gets on his face and he's asking the Lord, show me where to park, show me which 20 doors to knock on. His goal was that he get 10 conversations and 1 client. And that's how he started his business,
Wow.
And now, if you look at him now, he's in like on the city council, and he's got a big book of work and assets under management. And it's incredible what happened to him. But you hear these origin stories all the way to, where people are now. And it's been really, really amazing.
Okay. Yeah. We'll need to keep tuning in and encourage people to do the same. This has been fun and encourages me as well. Well, do you mind, Bob, praying for us to close our interview?
Not at all. Lord, thank you for this podcast. And I pray that people are listening would be encouraged and recognize, Lord, that you are the author and finisher of all of our faith. Lord, that we can turn to you for our practical needs and ask for practical miracles. Lord, that you will give supernatural strategy in areas where we don't know what strategy to even employ. Lord, I ask for all the listeners that they would recognize that building a culture of love is possible in their businesses, or if they're team leaders or shift leaders, or even if people are just starting jobs. Lord, bringing your light in is just a powerful weapon in learning how to act in the marketplace. So Lord, I just pray that divine favor would fall on everyone listening to this. And Lord, that you would be there in the times of despair and in the times of plenty. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Bob, for making time today.
Thanks so much,
such
you guys.
a blessing.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Okay, you guys too.
Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the Storyfield podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The Storyfield.